Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's our regular daily 12:30 to 12:45 SMESec. So SME, small to medium enterprise, and sec security, where we talk about all things security, focusing particularly on cyber security, but all delivered in plain English rather than Klingon. So we're not going to talk any technicalities. We're going to talk about real world words, because this is designed purely for business owners and business managers, rather than focused at technical people or cybersecurity people. That's all we focused at. So just to give you a picture of what we're doing later this week, because we've got a few other things coming up. So tomorrow we're going to continue talking about this particular area around the Mitre Att&ck framework, because we're continuing today with 3, which is initial access, and we've covered off the first 2. We'll have a quick refresher on those in a second. But also next week we've got a cybersecurity event on the 27th at 4 o'clock. It's for 1 hour, and if you want to take down those details there, we've got the hopping event. So it's an online platform. Register, get access. There's also capabilities of doing networking with your peers on there if you choose to. But we've got a 1 hour session that's broken up into 3 20-minute sections. The first section is going to be talking about current threat landscape, and that's Pete Rosinski of Assure Technical, and myself are going to talk about what the current situation is and what's happening in the world of cybersecurity and the current threats that are out there. We're going to then go on to talk about certification, especially for partnerships. So a lot of organizations now are asking you to have some kind of cybersecurity certification to prove that you've actually done something to protect your business, because if they then connect to your business and allow you into their systems, there's a potential that you could be the weak link. So they want to make sure that you've got some level of certification to be able to prove that you've got things in hand, you've got people, process, and some technical cybersecurity factors in place. So we're going to get Pete Rosinski to go through that from Assure Technical. And then finally, what we're going to do is talk about the difference between passive and active threat protection. Most people these days have got what we call passive threat detection, or EPP, which is endpoint protection, endpoint protection, rather than EDR, which is endpoint detect and recover. So EDR is quite different. So EPP is just like having great locks on your house. What EDR is having an alarm system and someone to turn up within a few minutes of the alarm going off and deal with things. So it's a very different approach to things, and it's something that's been driven by the activities of the hackers that a lot of people are having to move towards EDR. EDR is something that a lot of the enterprise organizations do, especially when they're 2,000 employees plus. But actually down at the smaller end, it's more of a challenge, because of the products are more difficult to implement. Having the facilities behind it, like a SOC or a security operations center, so people that have got the right skills and capabilities to deal with an attack, is a challenge for smaller businesses. Anybody who's sub 200 users really won't have those capabilities. And we're going to talk about how you can actually do that for smaller businesses and make yourself more secure. So let's get on to what we're going to talk about today. So we're just going to have a quick review of the framework. So I'm going to skip through this rather rapidly. So, the first thing that happens, stage 1, is reconnaissance. Get a good understanding of, the organization that's been targeted, understand users, infrastructure they've got, network hosts, any external public facing infrastructure, and try and find somewhere that they could exploit, depending on what type of attack they want to do. Second stage is reconnaissance, resource development. So building out those resources to carry out the attack, depending on what type of attack it is, getting the staging of those resources, even software development in some cases if it's required to be able to do it. Now we're coming on to initial access. So this is where we're going to do first access to the user systems in some way, and we're going to go into more depth about that in a few seconds. Following on, there's execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, and then exfiltration before the final thing, which is the impact of the actual the threat. So we're going to cover all these off. I'm going to say we're on to initial access today, so we're going to cover that off now. But if I just skip through the first two, because we've already covered those, so we're now on to stage 3, initial access. So first is I think called a drive-by compromise. So this is actually setting up either fake websites or compromising a real website and putting software on there and scripts that can actually compromise an organization because one of their users has been there. So some of the common places to do this are on things like pornographic websites, because people are trying to cover up what they're doing and go into these places, and it's quite easy for them to compromise it or create effectively a fake one. Or it could be a coupon site, offering low cost coupons for some of the prime retailers, and getting you to go there and again run a bit of script to get something onto your machine, a keylog or something that can actually help them compromise it. And this is drive-by compromise. So it's not specifically going for you. It's been set up just in case as you come along and you're web surfing, you end up there and you end up compromised. The other thing is exploiting any public facing applications that the organization, the target organization, has. So some kind of website or web presence or service that's been delivered, they're going to utilize some of the exploits that are available for these public facing type websites. We talked about Log4j the other day. So Log4j is a logging platform that's open source using Java, and there was an exploit found in that. So anybody who's using that on their websites, they could actually use that to actually access the backend system, and that's what they've been looking for, these exploits, so they can actually get through that public-facing website into the backend system. A lot of websites are using content management platforms, so CMS, commonly termed as. So WordPress and many others are out there. Again, they'll be looking for particular exploits or exploits of any of the plugins that are actually common to these type of sites as well. So it's finding ways to get via that public-facing application through onto inside of the system, onto the network, and onto a particular machine. There's also external remote services. A lot of organisations, especially if they're running, home workers. So, part of the last 2 years with the pandemic, a lot of people have got remote workers now or working from home. So, actually looking for remote services that allows those home workers to get into the company's systems using something like remote desktop, Citrix, WinFrame, which is another method of delivering Windows desktops out to users over what we call a thin client connection, and a variety of other ways that desktops are done. There are also things like VNC that is a technology, again, to give this remote access to a desktop that's within the company's organization. And they're secured in different ways. Sometimes it's using some gateways and using things like SSL encryption to protect it. But also there's ways that people use virtual private networks to do it. And again, looking to compromise one of those desktops via that mechanism. There could also be hardware that's been compromised, and this is quite interesting. And there's been a number of talks about this in the past about Chinese manufactured items, things like USB keys that people have purchased, and they've found actually malware on the key when they receive it. So it's not blank at all. It's actually got malware already installed on it. So a piece of software that can actually do something damaging to your user population. So buying these USB keys, can be an issue. But also, other IoT type devices. So things like cameras, sensors, and things like that that will connect to the network could potentially be hijacked initially by software being put on them that could be then distributed by the attacker into the systems internally. And there are a variety of things that could be used, things like even as innocuous as a keyboard. A keyboard could be manufactured and software could be actually installed within the keyboard to capture keystrokes that are being taken. So, we've got to be careful of these hardware pieces where they could infiltrate your systems through hardware. Phishing attack is one of the highest, and the moment it's about 55, nearly 60% of attacks are started through some kind of phishing campaign. So phishing is where an email is sent with some kind of link to a document that you're supposed to download, and it's malware, a link to a website. It could be something that says you need to update your credentials for your Microsoft or Google account. So you click on it and it's actually fictitious, and the hackers are using that to gather your login credentials from it. So phishing attacks. There is a slight difference because phishing is quite generic. It's sending out to large volumes, and the idea is you hopefully will catch someone with it. So you send in 10,000 now, you might get 50 or 60 people out of those 10,000 will click on it. So the next one on from that is what we call a spearfish attack. So spearfishing is looking specifically at an individual or a company or a group of individuals and actually tailoring those emails specifically to them. And it might be that they make sure they come from someone that they would trust, so one of their suppliers, one of their customers, and make it look like it's from them when they send this attack through an email mechanism again. So again, to infiltrate by downloading some software that looks like it's an invoice, a document. It could be a link to a website saying, "Don't forget to, register for this event," or even, it could be a link to reset your credentials again. But again, tailored specifically to that particular individual, so it's focused in the way it's done. Next thing is replication through removable media. I said before, from the hardware editions perspective, it could be that it's already infiltrated inside that USB key before it's sent out, but also using software when it malware to actually write to any removable devices. So if users are sharing USB keys to share data, there's a chance then to be able to replicate between machines when that USB key is removed and put into another user's machine. It could also be something like a USB connected hard drive that's been used for backups, and people move them between machines to be able to keep copies of them. And again, it's using that ability to move the actual software around that they're using to exploit the organization. Next is supply chain. So supply chain compromise can be done in a couple of different ways. And one example of it was very famous from about 18 months ago with SolarWinds. So SolarWinds are a provider of monitoring software and management software for enterprises to be able to keep an eye on their endpoints, their network infrastructure, server infrastructure, and keep an eye on everything, and also be able to remotely manage those type of devices. So these things are installed in many hundreds of, I think it's about 40 or 50,000 sites as a minimum, maybe many more than that. So what the hackers did was effectively infiltrate SolarWinds, but they didn't actually steal anything or move anything. What they did was actually update the source code for one of their updates, and actually infiltrate their malware into one of those updates. So when those updates were then pushed out to the user population, that malware was then within that update. So it went out to thousands of sites and then allowed them access into those organizations. And I think it was FireEye who identified this when they saw there was something going on. Then they identified it was actually from an update from SolarWinds. So these kind of infiltrations are becoming more and more popular, but also between customer and supplier relationships as well. So not just a tool that's been deployed, but also certain applications that might be shared between organizations that work together in partnership. So they're accessing things like GitHub, which is a repository for source code. They're accessing operating system source code. They're looking at open source communities and finding software that's commonly used a lot across a lot of web services and infiltrating those. So it's trying to get from one point to another down the chain to be able to access the target customer. But also trusted relationships, and that comes again from this customer supplier relationship. So if you've got a trusted relationship with an organization, you may set up some kind of bi-directional communication. It could be as simple as providing a virtual private network link between your organizations so you can access each other's systems to be able to do work. Or you may do some integration between one of your systems and a third party using something like XML, which is a data communications mechanism used between database-based applications. So these things can then be used as a conduit to send information and code, malicious code, into an intended target via that trusted relationship. And that's quite important. Next week, the event we're talking about on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, we're going to talk about certification and how that's becoming much more important to be able to prove to your partner, whether that's a customer, whether that's a supplier, and to actually show that you've actually done something about securing your business and you've got to a specific level of protection. And some of the common ones that are out there at the moment are Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, and IASME Governance, and these are going up different levels. Service providers commonly will do something like ISO 27001, which is a process-driven piece around cybersecurity, and also people and process from a security perspective as well. So, these are the kind of things that people are looking to achieve to make sure that they can prove that they've put some effort into their cybersecurity, and they can show that then to their prospective partner or current partner as they go forward. But this is not a one-off. This is something you're going to have to do year after year, and you've got to make sure that you maintain it as you go along. Right, so I think that's my last slide. Oh, valid accounts, that's the other thing as well. So one of the other things is to try and access valid accounts of your user population. And reconnaissance, when we talked about stage one earlier this week, they can actually identify particular users within your business, and things like public sources like LinkedIn and many other systems like that will give them access to understand the names of a lot of your employees. Then they can actually use then some social engineering and other tools, or phishing and spearfishing attacks, to compromise those valid accounts and get in. Commonly what they'll try and do is get the existing details for those accounts rather than trying to break them, because if it's broken and you have to use a different password, it's going to make it obvious that someone's compromised them. But if they've logged in and there's no two-form factor authentication, or MFA, multi-form factor authentication, so something like a text message, you've got to put a code in, or an application that pops said, "Is this you? Approve." Not on those systems. It makes it easier for them to compromise those valid accounts. Hopefully that's been of interest to you today. So we try and keep it short and sweet, and one of the key things is for this to be down to 15 minutes. I'm a couple of minutes over today, but we did do a little refresher on the first two of the stages that we're talking through, and now we're into three. So following on tomorrow, we're going to go on to the next stage, which is stage 4, execution. So it's executing that code and what they're going to do when that code executes. So we'll cover that stage off tomorrow. Again, if you'd like to join me for this cybersecurity event for businesses, and this is focused at SME businesses, so anybody who's 200 employees or less, it's focused at you. And again, it's all about securing your business in plain English, so there's no jargon, no abbreviations. We're going to focus on what you need to do to make your business protected. I'd say the key things we're going to cover: one is the current landscape. Peter's interviewing myself from Assured Technical. Pete's then going to cover off certification for partnership and how you can actually show to your partners that you have put some effort into securing your business. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the difference between passive and active threat protection. So EPP, endpoint protection, and EDR, endpoint detect and respond. And the key thing is that response, really detecting there's an issue and responding to it. And we use SOC services for that. We're going to cover that again next Wednesday at 4 p.m. So use the link if you want to register. It's a hop-in platform. Go and have a jump on there. Also, I've set it up as an event in LinkedIn, and we're going to stream it into LinkedIn as well. So if you don't get to register there, look out for the stream starting at 4 p.m. next Wednesday, and you can watch it live there. You'll be a bit limited and you can't interact with us as much. You know, we can post comments, but there'll be some other limitations on what you can do with it. But anyway, hopefully that was of interest to you today, and I look forward to catching you tomorrow when we move on to stage 4 execution. Thank you very much. Bye.